Hi, everybody. I've got another video here with our senior precious metals analyst at goldsilver.com, Jeff Clark. How are you doing, Jeff?
Doing really well, Mike. It's great to be with you again.
Jeff is sort of my expert when it comes to the mining. You know, I pay attention to economics and in fact, we're writing a book together right now, and Jeff's got a couple of chapters that cover some of the things that you're going to see here in this video. This is about the supply-demand crunch that's coming, and it's going to be huge. And if you watched the video on the gold-silver ratio, this is the reason that ratio is silver's going to catch up to gold. And recently, silver's value has been very low compared to gold's. And this is going to be dramatic. So tell us a little bit about the article, Jeff.
Well, I started noticing the past few years that the supply of silver was starting to roll over, the amount of new supply that was coming to the market every year. And so I started tracking this and then started doing the research and started watching it. And you'll see there that the total annual global supply of silver is now in an official decline. And what's interesting is that even though it's higher than the 90s, you'll see that decline, if you compare it to the period of the 1990s when miners called it the nuclear winter, because it was the nuclear 90s, they called it, because the price was stagnant. It went nowhere and they had a hard time making money. Well, even then, supply didn't really fall that much. And yet look at how it's starting to roll over now compared to back then. So the amount of new supply of silver that's coming to the market from both sources, mining and scrap, those are the two biggest sources of supply, is officially rolling over, and it's starting to go into a major reversal. And of course, that's going to have consequences when we hit the next spike in demand.
Yeah, and the thing about the prices that we've had, this is a projection here for 2019, and they tend to be optimistic, and the price fell since this projection. And so with an even lower price, I think this projection is off. It's going to come out lower, the supply for 2019. And you're showing here the top 10 largest silver producing countries. And most of them, there's a few where there's a little bit of increase, but most of them are producing less than they were just a few years ago.
Yes.
And then silver scrap. This is also a function of, it requires very high prices to get people to let go of silver objects and so on. And, you know, we had the run up to 2011, and then when the price dropped off, so did the scrap supply. And a lot of scrap did get cashed in during this time period. So there's actually less scrap out there. Am I correct?
That's a good point. Yes, there's less scrap that can come to market because there was such a high amount of recycling back in the early 2000s. And it's all a function of price. A lot of this is happening because the silver price is just too low to make it worthwhile to scrap sources, people turning it in for recycling, or businesses turning it in for recycling. They don't have a lot of incentive, and of course this impacts mine supply as well. But for scrap, you can see it's now at a 20-year low.
Yeah. This was called the big melt when silver hit $50 in 1980. But you couldn't get $50 for your silver when you were bringing in scrap because every dealer was afraid they'd pay too much, the price would fall, and they would lose. And so you had these huge premiums that dealers were, they might give you 60 or 70% of the value of the silver instead of your full value for scrap because, they have to then hedge it, and it's got to be sat on for a while because every refinery was backed up months and months and months because of all this excess scrap that came to market.
And it's even harder for retail people like us to turn in our silver for scrap because the industry's tightened up. Most of the scrap now is recycled through industrial companies So for you and I to turn in our scrap silver, we're not going to get anywhere near what the percentage we used to, because a lot of these scrap businesses are geared toward institutional companies that are turning in thousands and thousands of ounces of silver at a time. So that
Yeah.
makes it even harder for us to do that.
So let's move on to the next chart in here. This is the global silver inventories. And so this is government. And, I printed this in my book back. That was, I think we had data up to 2006 or 7. But they've just completely stopped selling. Isn't that amazing? No,
It is.
selling silver.
And what the argument that a lot of people will say is, well, we don't have silver in our currency anymore, which is true. So that's why governments aren't stockpiling it. But look at how low it is. It's less than 5% of 1 year supply. And this is globally. So there's no real backup plan if there's any type of industrial.
Governments aren't letting this go because you can't fight a war without silver. Silver is absolutely necessary for all of the electronics, and there's just a bazillion things that if there's a war that we get into, they've got to have a stockpile of silver. So governments are not letting go of this, and this isn't very much. It would be used up immediately.
Oh, it would. It could be gone literally overnight. It's just not enough to make a material difference if there's a big demand, need on the industrial side or whatever. There's just not a lot the government can do to bring more supply to the market.
There's less total supply. There's less new mine production. There's less scrap coming to market. Governments are not letting go of any of their silver, and now we've got higher demand, and yet the price has stayed low. This is there's gonna be a train wreck coming here when it comes to, and silver is just going to explode one day. So fabrication demand is going up higher. There's more industrial demand and fabrication of silverware and jewelry and things like that, right?
Yes, it's all uses of silver is what comprises fabrication demand. It's if silver is fabricated into any kind of form, even paste. Sometimes there's silver powder, there's silver paste for industrial uses. Anything that's fabricated shows up in that figure. And yes, you're right. It's just literally charging higher as the chart shows. And there's industrial demand. It's near record highs because we keep finding new uses for silver, but more importantly, for green technologies. If you want to go green, you are by default going silver because of silver's chemical properties. It's ideal for a lot of green technologies. So the more green the world goes, the more silver they are going to go.
I just bought some HEPA filters because I found that my air, I live in Puerto Rico. It's a humid climate here. And my air conditioners, I went for a blood test and, just a regular thing to keep track of my cholesterol and that kind of stuff. And some enzymes were elevated. And the doctor says, you're having an allergic reaction. Are you allergic to anything? And no. And he says, check your air conditioners. And we checked the air conditioners, and there was a forest of mold growing inside these things.
Oh, boy.
And so I just recently bought some HEPA air filters, and the air filters contain carbon and silver to remove. The silver helps to kill mold, mildew, fungus.
All kinds of bacteria.
Yeah. I got some colloidal silver to mop the floors with. I mean, I'm really going for it when it comes to trying to make sure there's no mold spores left in my house. We're spraying the furniture with colloidal silver, everything. So ETF holdings, they stay high. So this silver is in vaults off of the market, basically. Silver demand for solar panels.
Yes, I just put solar panels on my house this year. I put 33 panels on it, and I love it. And each solar panel has about 2/3 of a troy ounce of silver in them. So I put something like, what is that, 21, 22 ounces of silver is on my roof. And so in California, not a lot of people know this, but they passed a law recently that by January 1st of 2020, it will be required in the great state of California that every new home or structure, not just homes, that any building 3 stories or lower must have solar on the roof.
Wow.
So this is a
That's going to
requirement.
push this through the roof here. This is
Yes.
so the demand continues to rise for solar panels, and the consumption of silver is going to continue to rise. I'm
Yes.
going to be installing some solar in Puerto Rico here also. So fabrication demand in China, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. And so now we're at the end of the article here. Got any more comments?
Just that demand is not spiking necessarily on the investment side right now, but that is the big differentiator. Once investment demand begins to rise again, supply is just not really going to be in a position to meet it, especially, Mike, if we see something like you and I saw back in 2009, where demand just went through the roof.
Right.
The mints were completely unprepared, and you just couldn't get it immediately, and there was a waiting list, there was rationing, premiums went through the roof. The premiums in some cases got ridiculous.
We had like one silver product at a time that we could get. Everybody was like rationing, all of the suppliers, the mints, everybody was on allocation, it's called. And so we could only get one, like for a little, 1 week we'd have silver eagles, another week we'd have 100-ounce bars. And with gold, there was about a week where the only thing we could get was a kilo bar.
Yeah,
during that crash, during the Lehman Brothers event. There was a panic. That's where I said it becomes unaffordium and unobtainium. The spot price crashed along with the markets. The spot price went down well below $10. Silver was below $8, wasn't it, back in 2008-9?
Yeah, I remember it did dip below 10. Yeah.
And but the silver eagles on eBay were being sold at $35, and I know a dealer in Chicago that was selling 100-ounce bars at $18. So you're talking twice. You're getting 100% premium that people were paying over the spot price, because even though there's plenty of futures contracts, but right. when somebody actually wants to leave a store with a bar in their hand, they had to pay twice what they could have paid for a futures contract.
Well, what this article is really warning about is the fact that we could see that kind of demand again, and even greater, Mike, and match that up with even lower supply in the future than what we had back in 2009.
Right.
Because most of the metal that people buy is not from the secondary market. You're not buying it from, somebody else who's already
You're buying it from this market right here.
Exactly. You're buying it new. 70% of most of the metal that is bought by retail investors comes from new supply, and new supply is rolling over. It's going into a structural decline, and that would not be easy to remedy.
Okay, I think we'll wrap this video up. Thanks again for joining me, Jeff. This was wonderful. I always enjoy your insights and talking with you, and your insights into the mining industry are wonderful. Like I said, I pay attention to economics and what's going on in the economy and monetary history, but I really I'm not up on all of my mining statistics like you are. So this is excellent. Thank you very much. So if you want access to Jeff's latest articles that come out every week, sign up for the newsletter at goldsilver.com, and you'll get those in your email box first thing. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and sign up for the YouTube channel, become a subscriber, and click that little notification bell so that you get a reminder whenever we come out with a new video. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.